Hey, it's the advocate, and today I have the pleasure of interviewing a brother of mine. We have a long history, and we went to college together, and we grew up together. I remember going up to his school in high school and playing some basketball against him at Pine Forge Academy,
Indeed,
and then went to college and played ball with
indeed,
him and against him at Oakland University. And we've been friends for a long time. So I just want to welcome to the platform my brother Manny Jean Louis. He's a
indeed.
paramedic by trade, and he is also my brother. Welcome to the show. How you doing
Yo,
today, Manny?
appreciate it. I'm feeling good, feeling blessed, enjoying the blessings, man. Glad to be here.
Definitely. Now, Manny, I like to ask some questions in the beginning to see how you would respond.
Mhm.
So, if you could pick a favorite destination where you would like to travel, COVID, people haven't been able to move around.
Definitely.
But if you could think of a destination you would love to go to right now, where would you go?
Man, that's twofold. Of course, the country of my home birth, Haiti. I'd love to. I was baby when I left, so I'd love to go back. But obviously, that's plenty of unrest, and that's just a personal want. But as far as a chill vacation spot, I would, wife and I have been recently put on to Hawaii and all that it provides. So Hawaii is definitely a destination vacation place I'd like to go to.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Hawaii would be a great choice at this point, considering that we just got about 30 inches of snow dropped on
Yeah,
us.
you got hit. Right,
You know, so
exactly.
I would prefer Hawaii in a hot
Mm,
flash.
right.
Yeah, definitely. So, are you team Apple or are you team Android?
Oh, I'm Android all the way. Android all the way.
Thank you.
Definitely.
So you like my first
Oh,
interviewee that is a staunch, supporter
yeah.
of Team Android. So
Android all day.
salute to you,
Android all
brother.
day. Indeed. Android all day.
Yeah, me as well. I like Android, so that's a disclaimer.
Definitely.
So now, if I feel that as you know, healthcare workers, that we are superheroes because
Mm-hmm.
of the things that we have to do,
Mm-hmm.
given the nature of your work as well.
Right.
You provide a tremendous service to people who need it,
Mm-hmm.
at a moment's notice.
Mm-hmm.
And if you had a theme song that you could play before you start going to work, what song would that be?
Man, that's a good question. That's a good question. Not to be too cocky, but that Aloe Black on the man.
Okay, all right.
This kind of wakes
Listen,
you up,
man,
gets you ready, man.
definitely. Now, Manny, how did you get into the field of being a paramedic?
That's that. I actually stumbled into healthcare. It was born out of desperation initially. Coming out of college, I had my firstborn son, and I had to work. I didn't actually get to finish. So as I was working, they had a lot of those residential programs for the mentally challenged. So I started working around the area. We were in Massachusetts, so Leominster. Me and our good friend Tony. We were rooming together and working at the residential program. And so I did that for a little while, and then an opportunity came in for me to become a CNA, certified nursing assistant. And I went and did that. A little bit more money was involved there. So obviously I'm thinking about my finances, my budget, young family man. So trying to get things right. So I did that for a few years. And as I was working in the nursing home, uh, every time we'd have an emergency, we'd call 911. And it just seemed like time stood still when they walked through the door, and like the steam machine was on, and they just looked like heroes walking through the door, honestly. And I said, man, I wonder what it takes to get that job. So I had a brother at my church who was a paramedic, and he kind of told me the kind of the game plan on how to get into the field. So I did my education. You start off, many people don't know this, but emergency medical services (EMS) is built on 3 layers. They've added a fourth now, but we'll stick with the main 3 layers. And that's your EMT is your entry level. So you go through about a semester of school, and then you can work on the ambulance. You can drive the ambulance, and you assist the paramedic. Then there's a mid-level called the intermediate or advanced position, and they could do a couple more interventions, treat the patients a little bit more independently. And then there's a paramedic. That's the highest level of pre-hospital care that you can achieve. That usually takes about 2 years of schooling. So I started off as an EMT. I did that for about 11 years. And then I got into my paramedic education and then became a paramedic over the last 4 or 5 years. But it's all started off by working in the healthcare environment and seeing them come through. But healthcare just kind of stumbled into out of desperation and need to work. And but you know what? It's funny. You when you're in school, because I was in school and I was doing health related stuff in school. I was trying to be a physical therapist, so I was doing my A&P and stuff like that, and failing my A&P and stuff like that. But it was just something I didn't think I had a handle on. And then when you get into it and you start working in the field on a daily basis and you start growing in healthcare, you start realizing, oh, I actually like this. Like, this works for me. So as I grew and I connected with it, that's how I was able to kind of like understand it better and then pursue it even more. So yeah, that's kind of long-winded story, but that's how I stumbled into healthcare and I've been there ever since.
You know, and I want to go back a little bit too, because I want to see, you know, you got some grays in your chin, but
yes, sir.
I can remember a time where we were on a basketball court and every time down the court, like, you would get a steal, right?
Yep.
I want you, this is my interesting question for you, right? I want you to equate your tenacity on the court for defense to how you do your job as a paramedic.
You know, it's interesting because, I definitely, when it comes to basketball, I'm an aggressive, especially defensive player, for sure. And, you know, through the years, I've been blessed with some children and my sons who play ball. And I've been able to go to their high school games and they have the same general nose for defense and tenacity. And so if I translate that to my job, it's actually a reverse thing. My daughter would say it's opposite day, right? What happens with me is that I'm actually a lot more, not as necessarily as aggressive as I am. I fall back more in an observing way to kind of assess the situation. And I always feel like that gentle touch is actually much more needed, because a lot of times when you're dealing with patients, they're already scared. So you might know that they're moving towards an area where there's going to be trouble for their health, you know, the emergency situation. And you don't want to increase their anxiety. So you have to try to find a way to, how I would correlate the two is, you have to try to find a way to be aggressively compassionate. So you want to speak in a soft tone. You want to engage with good eye contact, build that confidence, build that rapport, and put them at ease, because you're a stranger coming to solve their problem. And sometimes they know they have a problem, but they don't know how bad it is. And based on your training, you know, okay, it's bad, but it could be worse. And so the first step to working through the problem with the individual is to put them at ease, which brings down their anxiety, to let them know that you're working together, clear communication, and to build that rapport. And so I believe that how I translated my skills on the court to my profession has been that instead of just being generally aggressive, I've been aggressive with the target goal of compassion. Because when someone, one medic always told me, I don't care how much you know till I know how much you care. So when that individual knows you care, then they'll be more willing to receive the knowledge you're giving them to help their medical situation.
That's beautiful. Now, can you please describe a challenging call you've had as a paramedic?
Indeed. You know, over the years, you know, definitely, you know, the thing about EMS is the unknown. That's what excites me about the job, is no matter what the call comes in, you never know how it's going to go, how it's going to turn out. No 2 days are the same. So it always makes the job exciting. But one of my last calls, because I've worked in a couple different states over the years, I started in Massachusetts, of course, then I moved up to Maine. And now I work in Georgia, you know, outside of Atlanta. And I did work in Atlanta for a while. And so, but my last call in the state of Maine, and Maine is an intriguing place because obviously it's very cold. Wintertime be around there like pretty much 11 months of the year. But outside of that, it's a very rural state. So you have a lot of wilderness, outdoor type of calls. So one of the last calls I did in Maine before I moved to Georgia was a rock quarry. And So it's if you see those big granite walls or
Straight to the point, grand opening, grand closing. Straight to the point, grand opening, grand closing. Straight to the point, grand opening, grand closing. Straight to the point, grand opening, grand closing.
My daughter said, Dad, I don't think they like me. I said, it's cool as long as you love you.
Or sidewalks with all the granite pavement. These are the individuals that actually drill the rock out of the ground and split the rock at the quarry. So these two gentlemen were standing on the rock quarry, and they have to drill it, jackhammer it. And when they jackhammer it, I guess the technique is, I've never worked there before, once you get to the point where it's going to split, you pick a side because the rock's going to split in half. So the rock split, and one gentleman jumped to the right, and the other gentleman, before he could also jump to the right, fell down in between the two stones. So as the stone rocked out, he fell in between it, and it rocked back on his leg. It didn't crush him all together, but it got his leg. So we get a call to go for a gentleman with a boulder on his foot. That's all we're told. So I'm thinking, because dispatch updates you as you drive to the call, like he got a stone on his foot, and his coworkers want to know if they should move it off his foot. So I'm like, it's a stone. How bad can it be, right? A boulder, even if it's a boulder, I'm not thinking like a boulder that's at least 6 feet high, 7 feet, 8 feet high. So I'm saying, yeah, move the boulder. But I had a great partner, and he advised me to say, let's hold on. Let's wait till we get there so we can evaluate it, because it might be worse than we think. It might not be a pebble, right? Sure enough, we got there, and it was like an 8-foot boulder that had been split in half. The gentleman was stuck in between, and all I could do was wedge my way like sideways in.
Are you serious?
Yeah, it was unbelievable. I barely could get to him because he was right around the corner there. And I got his arm, started an IV, gave him some medication for his pain, and also to kind of help him forget what he was going through, literally. And so it took us about an hour to extract him from that location. We had to call in life flight, had to get on the phone with a doctor for a possible field amputation. But that call was interesting, very intriguing. It called all the skills and all the education that I had to the forefront, and it also allowed me to work with my other teammates. And that's what happens in EMS. You have teammates, you have fire, you have police, you have life flight, you have other paramedics that showed up. I had another truck that came down to help me with another paramedic. And these are the type of things that make the job interesting. But in the end, God is good. The gentleman was actually to make it out of there safe. He didn't lose any limbs. I saw him later on at the hospital. He didn't even remember me based on the medication that we gave him. And he was fine. He was actually pretty fine, just a little injury to the leg, and that was it. So I want to say that was probably one of my most involved calls. And then coming down to Atlanta, working for Grady, which Grady's like nowhere else. I'm telling you. I mean, I'm sure, FDNY has its exciting adventures as well. And LA EMS has its adventures, I'm sure, too. These are some big names that you typically hear about, Florida as well. But Grady is a very unique place to work. The calls you do at Grady, the nature, and I think one medic said it best to me when I first got there. He said, if you just go into it with the mentality that everybody's trying to die on you, you'll be fine. And so, I definitely, my first and second call there at Grady, I had a gentleman that, I had to pretty much, I had never done this in my career up to that point, was what they call cardiovert. So that's when your heart rate's going so fast, we have to kind of hit the reset button with our machines and slow your heart rate down. And so his heart rate was up towards 200 plus. And we had to press the button on the machine, cardiovert him. So from there, he went from his heart rate changing to a seizure to cardiac arrest, all within a 10-15 minute span. And we got him to Grady, and Grady does what Grady does, and they were actually able to bring him back and by God's grace, and save him. So it's been some intriguing calls. I know I put 2 in 1 there, but I would definitely say that I've enjoyed my time at Grady, and Maine brought a lot of new and different elements to the field. But that's the wide range of EMS. It's everything from rural to city, from mild calls to major calls. You got to kind of be ready for everything. It's not always guts and glory, but I think I would say 90% of the job is just the mundane, basic, run-of-the-mill calls where you have to use more emotional care, emotional medicine, I would say, than emergency medicine. And just that compassion is a key component that you have to have in this field, because you're dealing with humans at a point where they're at their most vulnerable. And so you don't want to make it worse. You actually want to do no further harm, like the medical creed says. And you want to be, you want to give to them what you would want given to you. And also you want to give to them what you would want, how you want one of your family members to be treated. So definitely.
Would you recommend others to become a paramedic?
Yeah, I definitely would. The field is in great need. But I would say that there's a lot that comes with it. I guess I would recommend with reservation is how I would say it. I'd recommend it if one of two things. Your family structure is where it could handle it, because you could work anywhere from 12 to 16 to 24-hour shifts. I've been working 24-hour shifts for a while now, from when the kids were younger. And the big thing I would recommend when it comes to your hours that you work is to be able to strike a work-life balance. That's the big theme in the workplace today, is a work-life balance. And so what I did was, on my days off, I made my family the highlight. So even though I was tired coming off the shift, take a good shower, shake it off, and we'd go places, go to dinner, go do stuff. And so they felt like my days off was everything. So the days I was gone, they missed me, but it didn't hurt them as much, because it was joy looking forward to the days off. And so I would say if you do have a family and you get into EMS, it is about that work-life balance. If you're single, it's a great time to get into it. But I would say that you need to be mindful of the balance between the emotional strain and the physical strain that EMS can have on you. You see a lot of things. There's some beautiful calls where you truly are, used in a wonderful way to help someone's pain become easier. Then there's some tragic calls that you can't really make a difference, because you're not God. No matter how much some people think they are, I don't know how much the media hypes you up to be that hero, you can't undo what's done. So unfortunately, when you have some teenage suicides or things of that nature that you have to confront, that takes an emotional toll on you, and you need to be able to have a good way to process that. I'm a big proponent of spiritual, support, be it from a pastor, elder, personal prayer, reading your word, and also using critical stress incident debriefing, talking to professionals who are trained to help walk you through your feelings and emotions about the call, because we take on a lot when we're out here trying to serve the public, and sometimes we take on more than we actually should, because it wasn't in our hands. And so I feel like those are just some disclaimers, but the field is exciting. It's fun. There's a lot of ranges to it now. It's expanded. So you don't only have to work on the ambulance, although it's good to have a taste of that. You can work in the hospital. You can work in what they now call community paramedicine, where you kind of go door to door and you kind of do house calls, and you kind of are an extension of the emergency before the emergency. But, I could go on and on about this as a recruitment tool, but I would just say that I do encourage people who feel like they want to have that experience, especially if they're young. Not that, older gentlemen like myself can't get into the game, but if you're young, it opens up so many doors, because once you become a paramedic, you have only a 1 year bridge RN. You can go use your experience as a paramedic with references and go and get your physician's assistant as a PA. You can once you have your 1 year bridge to your RN, you can work towards your NP, nurse practitioner.
But if you work with people all the time and you just cannot remember their name, or you're just calling them something else, it's kind of disrespectful. And it's respectful and intentional to remember someone's name. My name is Contessa. You're going to remember my name not only because you have my bio and everything is branded, but because it's the story behind my name. Each of you has a story behind your name.
Practitioners, so there are a lot of veins and avenues off. That's not a difficult bridge to get into. And as a Black man in America, as a minority in the field in general, I definitely encourage all minorities to get into EMS, because typically the communities you're serving are in the minority. So now, without having that representation on board, it makes it difficult sometimes for other providers to connect with the community. I know when I was working in Massachusetts, the city of Fitchburg, I lived there. I played ball in the streets in Fitchburg while I was working on the truck. So if I went into certain zones in Fitchburg, which, were less than desirable to do a call, the brothers knew me there. So, and then I was in essence that guide to some of my other coworkers who didn't understand that zone. And so it was beneficial, instead of them having a bias or a prejudice to some of the individuals in the zone that may not have been as high income, to help me guide them away from the distraction of the environment to what the issue was that the patient needed. And so I'm a big advocate of minorities getting into the field. On the side, I teach first aid and CPR under the name of Freedom House Fab EMS. And if anybody has a chance down the road to go on YouTube, look up Freedom House. Freedom House was the group of first African-American paramedics in the United States. They were the first paramedics in general, and they were African-American. And a lot of people don't know that. And that's the history of emergency medical services in America. And so just to keep going on with that legacy, they got so good at what they did based on the doctor that they worked with, or the doctors that they worked with, that they were in high demand, because initially they were brought in just to treat their neighborhoods during the Martin Luther King riots and stuff like that after the assassination. And they were out of Pittsburgh. Short little history story. They were out of Pittsburgh, and they were so good that the rest of the city actually started calling for their services because they were so highly trained. Eventually, unfortunately, the documentary, which is kind of difficult to get a hand on, there's one gentleman who actually circulates it and does viewings of the documentary that he put together of this group, but they ended up folding because of outside influences that were not in support of their ventures. And so, and then kind of try to erase them from the history books. So as a Black man in EMS, I came across their story, and before I was a paramedic, and it inspired me to become a paramedic, because when you don't see a lot of your own representation, and not to make this a white or Black thing, but when you, as a Black man, when you don't see your own representation in certain fields, sometimes it brings a lot of doubt to your ability to actually accomplish it. And when you start realizing that you're part of a larger legacy, and that God has graced you with the same, mental capacities to do it, then you feel inspired and you push forward. And God is good, and I was able to actually achieve that goal. But I don't just achieve it for myself; I achieve it for those who look to me as an example, who I run into in the field, who aren't paramedics, who are striving for that, so they realize, oh, you did it, I can do it too, correct? And then also, just like I said, to have that additional representation in the field, to be an advocate for communities, for individuals, for environments that others may not be as aware of. And once again, the key focus is compassion, right? I mean, like, a lot of people don't realize it, but the story of the Good Samaritan is the story of the first paramedic, right? He found a man, right, on the side of the road, right?
Right.
Bonded his wounds, brought him to the hospital, was compassionate, and it was somebody that was actually his enemy, right? So it's a key thing to understand that it's a legacy of a field that has to do with compassion, caring, and loving, and just doing no further harm. So I try to share a lot of these different things to say, I definitely encourage, just to get back to your question, I definitely encourage those who are interested to look into the field. Don't go into it with eyes closed. There are some positives and there's some negatives. We don't necessarily make a lot of money, although we're making more now with COVID. I won't lie to you. They're definitely compensating a lot of us for our time and our labor and our risk. But I would say that you can make money, and a lot of it's in overtime. So you got to be ready and open to work overtime. And there's plenty of it. But the key thing is, if you want to make a difference every day, and if you want your days to be more exciting than dull, by all means, check it out at least. If it doesn't work for you, you can bow out gracefully. But if it does, you know what I'm saying? Yeah. You might leave a legacy behind.
Can you be a self-contracted paramedic?
To an extent, you can definitely develop a business like I'm developing now, where you teach first aid and CPR. You could develop a business where you do events, concerts, basketball games. Some of those things are harder to get into because they already have preset contracts with other entities. But there definitely is an avenue for you to go out and kind of do an entrepreneur independent thing as a paramedic. It definitely opens up a lot more doors. I'm interested more in the education route, just because that doesn't have the physical toll on your body. And you can't be young forever, right? So EMS on the streets is definitely a young man's game, just lifting, pulling, pushing, all that stuff. But, right now, God's graced me with a little bit of health, so I can still hang. But, I'm watching the clock on the wall, man. It's quitting time's coming up soon.
We're in the second quarter of life.
Right. There you go. Yeah. There you go. No overtime. So, but yeah, no, I think that you definitely can be independent as a contractor. And a lot of people I've seen down south, especially, they're able to actually develop their own companies where they do either non-emergency transport, hospital to home, or hospital to hospital. It's not 911, but you're still a paramedic. You still have EMTs. You still can build up your business. So there's definitely seems to be more avenues down south than up north. Up north is more fire-based or municipal-based or hospital-based. And so they have strong, well-established entities in place that do the 911 and or non-911 service contracts. So it's a little harder up north to do independent contracting, but you can do teaching always. You know what I mean?
Definitely. Now, Manny, I knew that people would be in for a treat when they heard you speak. And a lot of our conversations we've had over a span of 20, 25 years.
Sure.
But now recently we spoke and I was sharing with you and your response was very interesting. And I wanted to get into it a little bit because you made mention about relationships, about marriage, heading to marriage and things of that nature. And that if God is not in the person, that you basically can't trust them.
Yes, sir.
And would you care to expound on that? And like, what were you saying? What you mean by that?
Oh yeah, most definitely. So I'll start off with a question, and then I'll expound based on your answer. So when people get married, traditionally, what is the environment or location where they get married?
The environment or location that they get married in?
Where they hold the wedding at?
In like a wedding hall.
And what's a traditional spot that most brides want to get married at? Where?
In the church? Correct.
That's what I was looking for. So there's a long history to why people get married in the church. And I'm a subscribing Christian. So as a Christian, that history goes all the way back to the book of Genesis in the Garden of Eden. And the history has to do with one key component, God being there and God being a part of it and God blessing your union, right? So how I'd expand on it is this. As the bride gets ready for her special day, the groom, does whatever he has to do to show up on time, right? And maybe have the sharpest suit and his groommen, holding it down for him. We end up showing up at an appointed date, appointed time, all the proper, delegates there, or loved ones in the audience. And we stand and we gaze into each other's eyes, and your wife is the most beautiful you've ever seen in your whole life. As the groom, your wife looks at her husband and she says, man, that's the most handsome I've ever seen you, right? It's that special day, that special moment that you can't quite put into words, and hopefully you can capture in good videos and pictures. But you stare at each other and you're focused on the person in front of you. And what oftentimes happens, though, is there's someone above both of you. Y'all are standing in the presence of God. Yes, there's a pastor there officiating, for sure. Yes, there's your good friends from days.
Allow me to introduce a new product. It's called the Clyde Men's Fashion High Top by Jay Gross. She is a female clothing designer from my hometown of Freeport, New York. Long Island stand up. So you already know it can't be whack. Go check out her product now.
Long ago and in current times. But oftentimes that silent third partner there is God. And so, sure, the day is great. The wedding's great. The honeymoon's probably even better, right? But what happens oftentimes is after the music stops, as my wife says, and you're dealing back to the regular of the challenge of the daily grind, right? Now you got to worry about paying bills, and you got to worry about, family getting in the business, and you got to worry about maybe y'all have kids before. Hopefully not. In my case, unfortunately, I did. Or you're about to look on planning on having a family, right? So you have all these multiple factors at play. And the only person you're focused on working it out with, your teammate, your partner in this mission, wife or husband, right, is the two of y'all. So what happens during that time process is the person in front of you that you stood in front of at the altar, that you looked into their eyes, that you're dealing with daily life with, is the person looking at you and you're looking at them. And y'all just focused and fixated on each other. Tunnel vision, just right here. So when problems come up, you can't look to the left or the right, right? It's either that person's problem who created it, or it's my problem that created it, right? So we get dialed into this tunnel vision relationship when we forget that when it all started, there was a major third member of the party, and that was God. So my wife and I, over the years, by God's grace, and I only speak from the professional opinion of 23 years, praise God, is that we started focusing on the triangle theory, we call it, right? And so what is that? For us, we boil it down to a simple saying called, if the triangle ain't right, if the triangle's tight, the bubble's all right. And so what we mean by that is that if I'm looking up to God as a husband, and my wife is looking up to God, my wife is looking up to God as a wife, right? Then that makes a connection for the base. That is God, right? So God is at the helm and the head of all of it. And he was there on our wedding day anyhow. So he's there on our wedding day. He's there on our daily grind. But we oftentimes forget about him when we make it linear. But when we look up individually, so this part of the triangle, me, I'm looking up. I'm dealing with God, personal devotion, prayer, whatever. And then I'm asking him to guide my steps as a husband, my words, my patience, that 1 Corinthians love, right? 1 Corinthians 13. I'm trying to show her that kind of love. And then she in her corner, she's looking up to God, dealing with him, frustrations, irritations, problems. We're turning it all over to him. And we're keeping it real too. Like, we're in these conversations with God individually saying, man, your daughter's tripping today, man. You need to holler at her. I don't like how she came at me about them bills or whatever it is. She's saying your son lost his romance. He used to be about it, but now all of a sudden I'm chopped liver, right? So she talking to God just like that, keeping it real. He's our father, right? What child of yours, Chuck, comes to you and doesn't keep it real, right? By God's grace, with your relationship that you have with your kids, they talk to you about their needs, about their issues, about their frustrations, about their anxieties, their concerns. So in that same light, that's how we're supposed to be talking to God. So as I go in my corner, I'm having my one-on-ones with God, and I'm telling him, and I'm typically complaining, right? Because he's a suggestion box, right? So I'm like, God, man, Angel's doing this, Angel's doing that. My wife's name is Angel, by the way. So Angel's doing this, Angel's doing that, and she's over there saying, Manny's doing this and Manny's doing that. And then a conversation is not a one-way street, right? So at some point you got to be quiet and hear what God has to say back, right? So as we sit back and we get it, we vent it all out, right? He then speaks to us quietly, right? That still small voice. And he says, come on, son. You could have been a little bit more patient with your wife. Why don't you go over and give her a hug? apologize about your impatience, see what she feels about it, let it be water under the bridge. And as he speaks to me, to my spirit, and I take those actions and I go over there because I'm keeping myself accountable to him, I'm then able to meet her need as she's crying out. Either she's blaming me in her corner or she's just distraught and just saying, I don't know what happened, what wrong, whatever it is. She's in her corner with her accountability partner and the third person in that union, having her rap session. And so then I come over and I give her the hug she needs. I give her the compassionate word she needs. And that bridges us back together, right? Or say she did something to offend me. Because, as guys, oftentimes, we don't necessarily speak about what hurts, right? Because real talk, when I get angry, it's really just hurt. But I've only typically learned how to translate my hurt into just kind of anger and rage, right? Over the years, I've had to face the mirror and be like, what are you really angry about? You're not angry. You just hurt. And you feel a little soft saying, you hurt my feelings, right? But you have to say it. You got to say it because that's the person that you're keeping it real with. It's not about anybody else. It's not about a show for the public. It's about the reality of your relationship. And so she spoke to me a little sharply and I got in my feelings about it literally, and my feelings got hurt. Then I have to be able to find a way to communicate that, and she's having her rap session with God on this side of the triangle. He's saying, go show my son some love. He needs you right now. He might be putting on that mafioso, but he needs you right now. And all of a sudden, my wife comes to me and gives me a hug and melts my heart, right? All of a sudden, I'm a kid in the candy store, like, whatever you want, whatever you need, right? And I'm not angry, right? Now I'm not hurt. Now a band-aid been put on my boo-boo, right? So now life is nice and that love is flowing again. So I say all that to say that when we keep ourselves accountable to the third party, the head of the triangle, when the triangle's tight, the bubble's always going to be all right. And that's a very key thing and a very key component to the success in marriage, because marriage has its ups and downs. It's not just a straight road, a flat, easy road. It has its hills, it has its valleys. So as you're going through the hills and enjoying it, you're on a high, great. But then when you dip into a low because of miscommunication, because of whatever this, that, and the third, you need to have that accountability relationship, because that'll give you the guidance that'll bring it back together. You know what I'm saying? So I can go on and on about that for a minute, but I'll pause there for now.
Yeah, I think that is very interesting. And I think that people need to hear certain perspectives, because as you well know, people who are married, people who are in relationships is struggling. Mm-hmm. And there is a high failure rate to marriage. People it's almost starting like a new business or something, right? They say new businesses fail within the first 3 years. Right. Marriage is not even lasting, weeks and months and things of that nature. And I think that there's a lot of misconceptions. People are in marriages where it's very comfortable to be separate, right? Mm-hmm. Leading a whole different life. Mm-hmm. And, people can't talk about it, and instead of being trapped by communication, I feel like, I wanted to open the door to more communication. Mm-hmm. And get insight from people who have been successfully married. I don't know what the criteria would be, because, I'm sure a marriage would have to take multiple millions of hits to withstand it, to even have the experience to talk about it. Right. True. I would like to ask you about a conversation that you did have with your wife, and you were talking about trust, and she responded to you in a very surprised manner. Do you recall that conversation?
I do. Definitely. I appreciate you bringing that back up too for remembrance. So, this was before we were married. And you're in that lovey-dovey stage, boyfriend, girlfriend, man. As a boyfriend, you're gonna get those question and answer sessions. And I know most fellas, man, when we hear, let me ask you a question, we already know, like, either this is gonna end up really good for me because I'm gonna be a superstar and rock this question out, or I'm gonna be in the doghouse for a minute because I'm not gonna answer properly, right? So those pop quizzes, they come up often, man, and they don't just stop when you're dating. They continue on in marriage. So a lot of us dread, especially fellas, we dread the pop quiz, right? So my wife, we're having a great day. Everything's going well. She wasn't my wife at the time; she was my girlfriend. And so my girlfriend at the time, we're having a great day, hanging out, doing one of the things we typically like to do, either reading a book together, or watching a movie, or something. And the vibe is beautiful. The vibe is beautiful, and I'm excited. It's a good day in the neighborhood. And all of a sudden, she said, "Man, can I ask you a question?" I'm like, I already know. Like, here we go. Which pill you taking? Because you about to enter the matrix. Is it blue or red? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I'm like, hey, go ahead. Ask me a question, honey. What's going on? What you thinking? So she's like, would you ever cheat on me? I said, oh, mercy. Why you gotta get this question? Today was going so well. So, I compose myself. I take a minute, clear the throat, and then I answer in a way that I don't think she saw coming. And honestly, I was inspired to answer that way, but I didn't even see myself answering it that real. And so I said to her, with clarity in my voice, I said, honey, I would cheat on you every day, all day. And she said, what? Are you serious? Like, she was like, you're joking, right? I'm like, no. Every day, all day. She's like, so what's the point then? She started getting a little riled up. And I said, hold on. Hear me out. I said, if you're looking to me as the man and trusting in me as a man to never be unfaithful, never have bad thoughts, never move in a direction away from your affection, right? Then that's a fail. That's 100% of a fail. I said, the only guarantee you have is based on where I align myself with God. Because God's the only one who could give me, like we talked about, that accountability, first and foremost. When you think about this, the Bible story of Joseph, right? When he was being seduced by Potiphar's wife, right? Most average dudes who look at that story say they would have probably slipped, right? But Joseph had that accountability, right? He's like, how can I do this great sin and sin against Potiphar's wife? Nah. How can I do this great sin and sin against God? So Joseph had that accountability relationship. So for myself, during my pop quiz, God enlightened me while he allowed me to communicate that to Angel and say, listen, honey, if you're looking at me to be strong within my own strength, that's 1,000% fail. I said, but if you're looking at me and you're looking at my pattern of behavior and affiliation, which is daily Bible study, prayer, worship, talking and thinking the things of God, moving under that unction, following that accountability, making sure that I'm looking to refine my character day by day with him, then you can have that confidence that no matter what gets put in my path, I'm going to think about disappointing him before I think about disappointing you. But by default, if I don't disappoint him, I can never disappoint you. And so as she took a minute to lick her wounds of personal pride, right, and realize that it's not about you as it isn't about me. It's always about that third party. She was then able to realize that, okay, I'd rather have that confidence that you are a man who orders your steps after your maker and that you hold yourself accountable to that standard than just being a man who gives me false confidence and whispers sweet nothings and says, I got you, babe. I hold you down. I'll never cheat. Come on, man. How's that gonna work? Indeed.
Now, can you speak to the men who have fallen and, are trying to pick up and, carry their weight in terms of in their marriage or, try to be better men?
Yeah.
What would you say to men in particular that are in, difficult circumstances.
Mm-hmm.
The reason why I asked you that is that, I think that, as men, we need to be better examples. We fall, I know like some things that we can say can be misconstrued as hypocritical, but ultimately the role of the man, as we understand it, didn't change. We may not have met the standard.
Right.
So what do you would say to that?
Well, I would say that we always can have hope, especially if we desire to be better than we were before. Mistakes happen, and some are minor and some are major. I mean, marriage, when we talk about failure, it doesn't only have to be infidelity, right? I mean, we have marriages where there's failure in relation to responsibility of finances, and failure in responsibility to family time, and not letting your married wife raise kids like a single mother, right? And I was failing in that area. You know what I'm saying? As much as I've had some successes, I had failures too. And I will get back more specific to the infidelity side of things a little bit, but I'll speak first about general failure. That when you take a moment to, first of all, take self-inventory, right? Because you got to look at how you got to where you got to be able to kind of, what do they call it? Like reverse engineer, right? You have to be able to say, all right, this is where I messed up, and this is where I'm not going to go again. This is what I'm not going to do again. And then this is a better path. Let me walk on that. So first off, I want to say there's always hope as long as there's a savior, right? Because, God's grace is definitely sufficient. But there isn't, like I said, once again, I'm hammering this nail home, is there has to be accountability. And so it's not about just, it's the only way you can look in the mirror is if you're looking in the mirror through God's eyes. And remember, you didn't just let your partner down. And that's oftentimes where failure begins, is and kind of gets stuck in a cycle, is you trying to explain to your partner how you won't ever let them down again, and then still just staying within being yourself and not saying, all right, God, I let you and my partner down. How can I, first and foremost, make it right with you? And what are the things and steps you want me to take as a husband, whatever the case may be, father, whatever it might be, to walk in the right path, to walk in the light, right? So how should I do that, God? Show me, make it plain, put individuals in my path, maybe talk to a pastor, maybe talk to a good friend, someone who you respect, a mentor, whatever it might be, to help you find the best path for your walk. And then from there, you can, like I said, once again, letting God be your guide, you can then move forward and rebuild. I know there was a movie out there a while back about Fireproof, right? You remember that movie? And the gentleman was having a failing marriage. And the big thing for him was the effort, the intentional effort in the midst of what looked like an impossible roadblock, right? So a lot of times you have to go against your nature. So the things that you were used to doing, or the things you were comfortable doing, you kind of have to get out of that comfort zone for the greater good. So I'll give you a simple example. If I'm typically the type that can be a little bit defensive, a little bit of reactionary to my wife's words, always want to have the last word, always want to win the argument, going against that nature would be, say, you know what? Bite the bullet on this one. Yeah, you might be nitpicky about the logic and the logistics on her argument, but let it go. Like, if you're not going to think about this a year from now, don't think about it now. Just let it go. Letting that argument go, but not just ignoring it and pacifying your wife, but actually pausing your side of the well-built debate that you're about to drop on her head, and then listening to what she's actually saying, and then embracing it and repeating it back to her so that you actually are engaged in what she's trying to communicate. You walk away from that better from it, right? It's an improvement, right? Because just as a little example, it's an improvement because, one, you put yourself aside, you put your pride aside, you put the winning argument you probably had in the clip aside too. Because, a lot of times, decent debater, you know what I mean? So you probably had a good argument formulated that would have been, won through force and logic, but, you put it aside. and your wife was able to express herself, and then you were able to actually gain some insight into an area that you were darkened by because you never paid attention and you were always formulating a debate. So as a short example, and we'll move on quickly, part of it is going against what you normally do to find a better path. And then when we talk about in cases where there is a breaking of trust with infidelity, most definitely, first and foremost, you have to repent. You have to repent. And I used to teach the kids, sorry doesn't cut it. Because a lot of times we'll say sorry very flippantly, right? But when I try to teach our sons and our daughter now that don't say sorry. I don't want to hear sorry. You shouldn't tell people sorry. You should say, I apologize. And typically when you apologize about something, apologize is not a period. It's a comma. Because then you have to, most people want, and you should know what you're apologizing for. So for example, if I disrespected you, my brother, in public, and I kind of felt it based on the vibe, I go to you after and say, listen, Brother Chuck, I want to apologize for how I came off on you in public the other day. I realized that that's not the nature of a relationship. And, I was connected enough to see that it disturbed you. And I could be wrong, but specifically, I want to apologize about that. I don't want to give you any excuses. I want to ask if you forgive me, blah, 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 right? And therefore, I leave it in your court, but I've taken accountability about the specific action in which I harmed you. And so oftentimes, I use that as a little example to say, when it comes to infidelity, first and foremost, an apology must be given, a heartfelt, sincere apology, which in essence is also repentance, because you're not just apologizing, remember, to the person you harmed, because there's three involved. You're apologizing and you're repentant to God for letting him down, right? For not holding on to his strength in the midst of temptation, right? And then also asking him to give you strength when temptation comes again, because if Satan's come and hit you with that bullet in the clip, you think he's not going to reload and shoot that one again? It worked. So if it worked once, he's going to try it a second, third, fourth, fifth time. So you got to realize, heads up, yeah, you're going to apologize, you're going to repent, and you're going to work diligently to find a new path to walk on. But you're also going to have a heads up that same bullet's going to come hit you again. That's going to be subtle. It'll be very easy. A new coworker needs a ride home. Boom, boom, boom. Things that are outside of your control, right? I had to give her a ride home. I had to work overtime. A bunch of nonsense that you could technically justify. But at the same time, are you looking at the warning signs and say, oh, I see it. I see a snake in the grass. I see it. And it ain't the person. It's not the female who just walking a path and thinks you're a nice guy, right? It's the way that the devil's trying to use that circumstance to trip you up again and put you back on breaking your build of trust, your bridge of trust. So just to summarize a little swiftly and say that, you want to be able to keep that accountability with you and God. You want to apologize, which means you want to be specific about how you harmed your wife. You want to then look at that harm before you even apologize and reverse engineer it so that you don't go down that path again. But it ain't, remember, when it's all said and done, it's not about your personal strength. It's about asking God to give you the strength to stay away from that path, whatever it was, be it, items on internet that you might be watching that might be triggering it, social media, pornography sites, whatever the case may be, things that feed that side of things, that develop that, or like I said, an environment, an individual that you might be getting a little too chummy with. And I'll add this component. One of the hardest things and harshest things in my conversation with my wife that I've had is a lot of times it's not about the actual act of infidelity in relation to sexual relations with another woman. Sometimes that may never be the case. A lot of cats get caught up, fellas get caught up in the emotional side of it. Either being the listening ear for this female and then the conversation kind of becoming a little bit offline and off color. So that when our wives catch us with the text messages or whatever it might be, because, whatever you do in darkness eventually going to come to light. Now they're emotionally distraught, and that can be a heavier hit for them emotionally than the physical act. Because a lot of times they know that you didn't invest nothing in the physical act, and you could never think about that again. But the emotional connection you made with this other female, or that this other female in some cases made with you, you know what I mean? Because you're still responsible for the connection the path you allow for the other female to connect with you. Because you still could be like, I'm not even feeling her like that. But when she, you know, was naming her firstborn son after you, she obviously was feeling you like that, and you let it out. You let that path out for that. So a lot of times I wanted to bring the whole thing in and say, it's not only about sexual interactions with other females, it's also about the emotional. And we have to be mindful, because sometimes it's not even, I'm not gonna say it's not our fault, but we're not always as hip to how we start developing these other extracurricular emotional relationships with other individuals. And we just played it. I'm the nice guy, I was just looking out. And then we don't realize, oh, man, I'm spending a lot of quality time with this person. Well, I'm kind of doing things that for this person I would have done for my wife. Wow. Oh, wow. What happened? You know what I mean? And all of a sudden we're finding ourselves in an extramarital relationship, emotional relationship that is destructive to our marriage. So I also want to put that caveat in there that we need to be mindful of all avenues of attack: emotional, physical, mental, spiritual. You know what I mean? So just, you know, I would say, like I said, just to summarize again, you know, you want to take time with the Lord and accountability to realize what you do, where you went wrong. You want to then reverse engineer that to choose all other paths away from that one. You want to go and be intent about your apology, and specific in relation to first apologizing to God, which is in essence repentance, right? You're asking forgiveness for your sins. You're repenting and asking strength to not repeat that sin, which is very possible. And then you're going to your wife who you've harmed. You're apologizing. You're doing any and everything to rebuild that bridge of trust. It's not going to be easy. It's very difficult, but it's doable. You know, because with God in the mix, man, all things can be restored, right? So just a long and a short on that point, to be encouraged, to keep hope, and to do everything within your power to fix the situation, but knowing that the true fix is using God, right? Using God to strengthen you, and using God to be accountable to, and to go forward and repair the hurt and harm to your spouse.
Well, Manny, I just wanted to say that I think that the subject matter is on point. I think you played your position as a paramedic, revived a lot of individual situations, not just, you know, on the health side of things.
Yes, sir.
What as a family man, a father, you know, a husband, a paramedic, what do you do to unwind and to replenish yourself so that you can do everything that you need to do?
Well, you know, through the years, especially when I first became a father, I got into golf. Actually, I was having a real frustrating day at home. We just had our first son, and there was a driving range that was open. I was driving down the highway, and I saw it, Route 2 going towards Boston, you know, in Mass. It was right in Lancaster. So I pulled in, and there was a gentleman at the desk, and I said, you know, what does it take to go hit some balls and stuff? And he said, oh, you could borrow some clubs here. You can go. We still have about an hour or two open. Why don't you go? Here's a small bucket. Go have fun. And you know, I wasn't good at golf. I had taken a class in college, but you know, I was still figuring it out. So I was swinging away, but it took out a lot of the frustration and stress and strain out of my day. I returned home a much more mellowed out gentleman. I was able to kind of deal with the challenges that were awaiting me there, because they don't just go away because you walk away. And then after that, I got the bug. And so throughout all the years, the kids know for my birthday, I don't want a lot. Honestly, typically I want to just go play around the golf with the boys. And so we usually go play golf. My daughter too. We have a daddy-daughter date on the golf course, and we go out and play. Either go to the driving range, or we play, like, usually she can only handle one hole. She's about to be 12 in a couple weeks, but she was 11 at the time. So we'll go play like one hole, hit the driving range, and do stuff like that. Ironically, both of our sons work at Topgolf right now down in Huntsville, Alabama. So obviously they've enjoyed the game as well. But that's typically that helps me unwind. Exercise is important, and quality time, man. My wife calls me an introvert, and my daughter calls me a family-vert. Because she says you like everybody, you only like hanging with your family. You really don't. Oftentimes, you need that de-stressing time, but your family is allowed into your little circle. So, I definitely I like reading. I like reading, especially I got that new Kindle Paperwhite. So I've got a lot of books, paper books, actually books. And my wife was like, "Let's downsize the library." So I got the Kindle White, and that allows me to have a bunch of books at my fingertips. So reading, of course, without a doubt, having that spiritual connection. Early morning devotion. I'm not a great singer, but in the quietness of my devotional time, I sound like an operatic tenor of great renown. So,
man.
Definitely. So yeah, so I do that. I do my personal devotion. I get in some exercise. I try to stay healthy. Exercising also helps de-stress. When you're working on the job, a lot of times the adrenaline from the job sits in our veins and arteries. And if you don't exercise and sweat it out, it actually can create heart disease. So I try to keep at least a little bit of steady exercise going on. Every now and again, I sign myself up for 5Ks because it's forcing me to have to run it, and I paid money for it. So I ain't trying to lose my coin. So I do those type of things, I balance those things. But for me, the big thing is the spiritual component, a little bit of recreation, right? Playing golf and hanging out with my wife. Having a family has been a blessing for me because it provides kind of all the things I need. The company, the jokes. I mean, my wife and I, we have jokes for days. So, we're just developing one thing after another. We share a lot of the same interests. We introduce each other to our own interests, and we kind of get down. So, though that balance aspect of things kind of keeps me level-headed and balanced. You know what I mean?
Definitely. Well, Manny, I just want to say thank you for sharing and also contributing to this conversation.
Indeed.
I think that as a paramedic, that your job suits you. It suits your personality. I think that people are lucky to have you in that field. And I just want to say that I know that you are where you are in your career. I want to give you your kudos, and I know the best is yet to come.
I appreciate it. Much respect. We were talking the other day. You knew me when I thought about EMS as just a dream, and now it's been 15 years. So I appreciate your friendship, your brotherhood, your support, your encouragement, and you continuing to push the standard, man, and maintain that standard. So that, as I said, from near or from afar, man, I've stayed inspired by what you do. Continue to go forward. Continue to bless others with what you do. And, continue to be that inspiration for your crew, man. Definitely. So continue to be that advocate in life, brother. I appreciate it.
Definitely, brother. Take care.
All right. Much love, respect.
All right.
Indeed. Walk in the light.